It was an ordinary morning in the Providence Municipal Court, the kind of day when minor infractions filled the docket and familiar faces came and went in steady rhythm. Outside, the city stirred awake to the sound of buses, distant horns, and the hum of everyday life. Inside, the small courtroom felt almost sacred, calm, deliberate, and quietly human. Judge Frank Caprio had seen thousands of people pass through those wooden doors. Some came trembling, others indifferent, a few angry. But through the years, his courtroom had become more than a place of judgment. It was a place of understanding. Every decision, every word he spoke, came from a belief that compassion was not weakness. It was the foundation of true justice. That morning, as he reviewed the next case file, he noticed the name, Daniel Cross. It stood out instantly. Caprio recognized it not from previous hearings, but from headlines and glossy real estate magazines. Daniel Cross was a billionaire developer, a man whose empire spanned luxury hotels, towers, and private estates across the East Coast. His wealth was legendary. His arrogance, too, was well known. Daniel had been cited for multiple traffic violations, speeding, illegal parking in a handicap zone, and a reckless driving incident involving one of his high-end cars. Normally, such cases would pass quietly, resolved with fines. But the tone of the officer's report was different. Driver displayed extreme disrespect to public officers, made threats about legal consequences, and invoked influence. Caprio closed the folder gently. The weight of paper meant little, but what it represented, the human attitude behind it, mattered deeply. When Daniel Cross entered the courtroom, the air shifted. His presence filled the space like a storm cloud, sharp suit, gold watch, a confidence that bordered on disdain. He walked not as a man entering a court of law, but as someone visiting an inconvenience beneath him. Reporters had whispered he might try to make an example of this small-town court. The bailiff announced the case, and the quiet routine resumed. To most in the room, it was simply another hearing, another morning. But for Judge Caprio, it was something else, an opportunity to remind a man of what truly defines worth. As the proceedings began, the facts were simple enough: violations caught on camera, clear evidence of disregard for the law. Yet Daniel appeared uninterested. His body language spoke volumes, a man too wealthy to care, too powerful to be told no. Caprio's gaze remained steady, calm, unbothered. He had seen aggression before, pride before, defiance before, and knew that beneath such armor there often hid a kind of insecurity only humility could heal. As evidence was reviewed, murmurs ran through the small audience. They recognized the billionaire. Some whispered about his charity galas and lavish parties, others about the buildings that bore his name. Yet there he was, standing before the same wooden bench where bus drivers, teachers, janitors, and single mothers had stood before. In this room, money had no special seat. When the time came to render judgment, Caprio's tone was the same as it always was: steady, deliberate, respectful. He spoke not to destroy, but to reveal. The fine, by law, was substantial, yet insignificant to someone of Daniel's wealth. Caprio could have ended it there, handed down the amount, and moved on. But something in his heart told him this case needed more than a number. It needed a truth. The courtroom remained silent. Daniel's arrogance seemed to falter only slightly under the weight of that silence. Perhaps for the first time, he sensed that his words carried less power here than the quiet authority of the man behind the bench. And then, with that gentle yet unflinching voice, Caprio reminded him, and everyone listening, that justice was not a currency to be traded. He reminded the room that the law was not a mirror reflecting wealth, but a scale balanced by conscience. Daniel Cross, for all his millions, stood exposed, not financially, but morally. The people in the gallery could almost feel the shift, a man stripped of entitlement, forced to stand as just another citizen before the truth. And then came the moment that would later echo far beyond the courtroom. With his ruling delivered, Caprio spoke of perspective, of the lives that built the city Daniel profited from. He spoke of men and women who cleaned, drove, served, and built, people whose names would never appear on skyscrapers, but whose dignity formed the foundation of everything. And quietly, as if offering a final, measured truth, Caprio mentioned that his late father had once worked as a janitor in one of Daniel Cross's first hotels. Not as a partner or investor, but as a man who scrubbed marble floors that Daniel would later walk across in polished shoes. The courtroom fell silent again, heavier than before. Daniel's confident posture faltered, his gaze dropped. There was no anger in Caprio's tone, no vengeance, only honesty. He explained how his father, despite his humble job, had believed in fairness, in treating every person with respect. A man's worth, Caprio had once told his own sons, is not measured by what he owns, but by how he treats those who can give him nothing. That lesson, learned from a janitor, now became the quiet verdict upon a billionaire. Daniel Cross left the courtroom not in chains, not in disgrace, but in silence, the kind that humbles more than punishment ever could. Outside, cameras waited. He said nothing to them. For the first time, his usual confidence had turned to reflection. News of the hearing spread quickly. Clips appeared online, headlines spoke of Judge Caprio's powerful lesson, and millions watched a man known for kindness remind the world that compassion can also correct. Caprio himself never spoke publicly about it again. For him, it was just another day, another reminder that every human being, rich, poor, or somewhere in between, stands equal before the law. In the days that followed, people discussed not the fine or the charge, but the moment Caprio mentioned his father. That simple revelation pierced through social barriers. It was not about revenge, it was about dignity. Daniel Cross, in his quiet moments, could not escape that memory. He would think of the judge's calm expression, the weight of the words, the mirror they held to his own life. He had built towers that touched the sky, but in that courtroom, he had been reminded of the ground beneath them. The janitor's son had become the judge, and the man who once owned those marble floors had learned to bow his head before the law. Weeks later, someone left a single white rose at the steps of the Providence courthouse. No note, no signature. Only a symbol, quiet, pure, and perhaps regretful. Judge Caprio never asked who left it. He didn't need to. Some lessons, he knew, did not need to be spoken twice. In a world obsessed with wealth and power, moments like these remind us why people trust Judge Caprio, not just as a judge, but as a conscience. Justice, in his courtroom, isn't cold or mechanical. It breathes. It listens. And sometimes, it humbles even the highest among us. Because in the end, no one is truly rich enough to buy respect, and no one is ever too small to deserve it.